Doctor Who, a show that has been around for almost 58 years, is the longest running sci-fi series to date, with over 862 episodes with 97 missing, billions in viewing figures and 1.8 billion in global sales. Although this wasn't always the case and certainly was not expected to get this far. In this series, we are going to discover how an idea from the mind of Sidney Newman was brought to life by visionary producer Verity Lambert and the brilliant Waris Hussein. This is the creation of Doctor Who. Disclaimer: there may be some historical inaccuracies in this series. With a show that has a history longer than my arm, there is bound to have been a game of Chinese whispers played somewhere. I would like to mention that a lot of the clips and some information is from the 2013 docufilm An Adventure in Space and Time, as that is the best source for behind the scenes footage and information. But before taking notes on what I saw, I cross-referenced with sources online. I have conducted thorough research and fact-checked before taking notes, but please keep an open mind and enjoy. To start our story, we need to travel back in time, and I mean a while back, all the way to early 1963. There were loads of discussions and plans for Doctor Who at the start of the year. The head of drama at the BBC, Sidney Newman, wanted to create a show to fill the 25-minute gap between two TV shows in the afternoon, Grandstand and Jukebox Jury. He wanted something for the family, something adventurous and educational, and seeing the rise in popularity for science fiction in the 1960s, that was his best bet. He specifically mentioned how he didn't want to see any BEMs in the show, which was his abbreviation for bug-eyed monsters. He wanted to incorporate time travel into the series to teach kids real history. A quote from An Adventure in Space and Time from 2013 goes as follows.
I certainly hope so. We need stuff to keep the sports fans hooked, and the kids too.
Competitive tiddlywinks?
You know what I'm talking about.
Science fiction. Is it really that popular?
It was, last time I took a look.
With juvenile boys, perhaps? I like it.
We want to do a science fiction serial. Legitimate stuff, though. No tin robots or BEMs.
BEMs?
Bug-eyed monsters. You know, mutations and death rays and brains in a glass jar, that kind of crap. We want history, too. Proper history. The kids at home should learn something.
He came up with the concept of a good-looking guy, good-looking gal, a kid who gets herself into all kinds of trouble, plus an older man, quirky, travelling through space and time getting into scrapes. He dubbed this idea Doctor Who. He contacted an old friend and old production assistant Verity Lambert to produce the show, her first ever producer role. She had her heart set on making this show work and dedicated herself to it, proving all of the stereotypes of women in the 1960s wrong. The original concept scripts were worked on by Verity and Anthony Coburn alongside script editor David Whittaker. The story was called An Unearthly Child. The story followed Barbara Wright and Ian Chesterton, two school teachers at the Coal Hill School. They're suspicious of a student of theirs, Susan Foreman. She has exceptional knowledge for a 15-year-old girl in 1963. Enthralled by curiosity, they follow her home one night, but they find out that home is a junkyard with nothing but rubbish and an old police box. A mysterious old man comes along and insists he has no idea what they're talking about. Susan calls out to the old man, and Barbara and Ian force themselves into the box, but what they come across is almost impossible. The box is actually a space and time machine called a TARDIS, It has the ability to change its appearance depending where in time and space it is. After a struggle, they're whisked away into the past and have an adventure with cavemen. This story wasn't the original story due to air. It was supposed to be called The Giants and have the main cast reduced in size, but was scrapped as the story wasn't completely ready and the idea of shrinking the characters down was impossible for the technology and the budget of the time. Furthermore, this story wouldn't suit as an opener for a new series. The idea of the police box was thought up by Verity and written in more detail by Anthony Coburn. The interior was created by Peter Brackacki, rather quickly might I add.
You are a very trying woman.
Then I'll get out of your hair. Maybe the muse will be with you. Maybe it will be the best thing you've ever thought of.
Very well. Very well. Here, madam. Here's your bloody TARDIS.
The series was granted £2,300 per episode, around £41,000 in 2021, with an additional £500 to build the TARDIS prop, around £8,000 today. The show was due to be filmed many times over, the 5th and the 19th of July. This was delayed as the 19th was used as a date to test the dematerialization sequence of the TARDIS. There were complications with technical issues and line mess-ups. The original pilot was filmed on the 27th of September 1963, directed by Waris Hussein, and featured William Hartnell as the Doctor, Carol Ann Ford as Susan Foreman, Jacqueline Hill, a friend of Verity's, as Barbara Wright, and William Russell as Ian Chesterton. However, this episode never saw the public's television screens as Sidney Newman hated it. He wanted a lot changed, such as the reference to the time the Doctor and Susan come from.
We should fire the Perrier. Right. Take out the reference to the future time they've come from. 49th century. It's too specific. It's Doctor Who, remember? And the old guy's too nasty. He should be cuter, funnier. And the kid needs to be cheeky too, like a regular teenager.
He felt the Doctor was too harsh and abrasive, and in general, he felt the show would be too scary for kids. So that episode was shelved and re-recorded. It wasn't until the 26th of August 1991 that the public first got to watch the original record of Doctor Who's first ever episode. William Hartnell was very hell-bent on designating certain buttons on the TARDIS console to certain features. He believed that if there was no sense of continuity with what the buttons did, the kids will notice.
I need time to plot out all the buttons, you see.
Buttons?
On the controls, all the switches and dials. I need to know what they all do. What if I press something to open the doors and the next week I use it to blow us all up? You must see that. The children will spot it, you see, if we try and fudge it.
William Hartnell had a long history of only being casted for army roles on television and was craving for something different. But when offered the role of the Doctor, he didn't jump at it straight away.
You the director, son?
Yes.
Hardly out of the cradle, the pair of you. Right, let's talk turkey. I'm not sure about this, not sure at all.
No?
Apart from anything else, I don't want to take on another long run. Had enough of that on the army game. Nearly killed me.
It took some encouragement from Verity Lambert for him to really take to the role. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to talk about other aspects of the episode that was kept and continued. The opening theme is one of the most iconic theme tunes in the world and can be recognised almost anywhere. It has had many reworks and renditions over time, but in many ways keeps true to the original theme written by Ron Grainer and Delia Derbyshire of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. Derbyshire's composition was created by recording sounds from things around her. To make the Doctor Who theme, Derbyshire recorded sounds onto physical tape, including but not excluded to a plucked piano string, wooden blocks and clanging metal. She then cut up the tape, adjusted the tempo and spliced it together to create the eerie futuristic music we all know and love. It is also worth mentioning that the sounds for the TARDIS taking off and landing were also made in the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. It was made by scraping a house key against piano strings, speeding it up, reversing it and increasing the pitch. But what would an opening theme be without the visuals to go along with it? To properly tell this side of an amazing story, we need to take a trip further back in time to 1960. We go to Lime Grove Studio, where technician Norman Taylor had some free time and was experimenting with some visual techniques. He was pointing a camera back at the monitor showing its own feed. Now, this technique wasn't created by Norman, however, what he was doing differently had some remarkable effects. If a light source is shown in front of the camera, it creates visual loops of white blobs swirling and swooping around infinitely. He dubbed this Howl Around. Amazed by this, he showed fellow technician Ben Palmer. Ben Palmer was commissioned to create the titles for a new show, Tobias and the Angel. He decided to adopt this technique and he created his own set of Howl Around footage for it. Now we have that cleared up, back to 1963. Verity was amazed by the titles for Tobias and the Angel and decided to show graphic designer Bernard Lodge, who worked on Doctor Who for many years after this. He created a simple typeface as the show's logo, as not to conflict with the patterns that will soon cover the screen. A day was booked to film the titles, but it took a while to actually get anything done. The issue with Howl Around, having done a couple myself, I understand this, it's hard to keep a pattern on the screen for long enough. Eventually, they got something going and filmed it. They also had one of the assistants stand in front of the camera to try and see what would happen if a face was added to the titles. The result was not what was expected. Verity thought it was terrifying and would scare the children, so the idea was shelved until Doctor Who's second title sequence, but more on that later. But there wasn't enough footage. In a bid for the BBC to save money, they had to reuse the first few seconds of Tobias and the Angels titles. Now we take a step back onto the set of Doctor Who. The re-record was done in early October of 1963, with changes to character portrayals, costumes and a few other details changed. Going into more detail with that, Susan can be seen in the original record flicking ink onto paper and making a pattern, which is never explained. This was changed to her reading the book on the French Revolution and making comments of how it was incorrect. The re-record of An Unearthly Child was aired on the 23rd November 1963 at 5:15 PM. However, it aired 80 seconds behind schedule, as that same day, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and they had an announcement play before the episode started.
It is with deep regret that we announce that President Kennedy is dead. He was shot down as he was driving in an open car through the city of Dallas, Texas. The identity of the assassin remains unconfirmed at this time.
Due to this, everyone was watching the news and Doctor Who was placed on the back burner by the general public.
It was very good, Bill.
And now we return to the news. Vice President Lyndon Johnson was yesterday sworn in as the 36th President of the United States following the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy in Dalek.
They'll all be watching the news.
The episode was rerun the following Saturday on the 30th of November 1963 before the second episode aired to get a fair crack of the whip. This wasn't the only thing that happened that day. Filming for the next serial began, and this serial is what was going to give Doctor Who the takeoff it needed. The Daleks, the most iconic villains in British television, created by Terry Nation. They were introduced to the general public on the 21st of December 1963 and ran in 7 parts until the 1st of February 1964. This made a massive impression. The first episode received 6.9 million views, and by the 7th part, it received 10.4 million. This is incredible considering An Unearthly Child only received 4.4 million viewers. However, on the rerun, they received 6.4 million, which is a little more respectable. Nation was commissioned to write a story, and he came up with The Survivors, influenced by racial extermination by the Nazis and the concerns of advanced warfare. He also took inspiration from H.G. Wells' book The Time Machine. Verity was wildly impressed by Nation's story outline, that she extended his story from 6 parts to 7 to better express the story. Sidney was not happy with this story idea, as he wanted to avoid bug-eyed monsters, but due to lack of prepared scripts, he was forced to allow production to continue.
I don't much like the way the show's going. First, goddamn cavemen.
No choice.
And then these Daleks.
Daleks.
Exactly what I wanted to avoid. Cheap jack science fiction trash.
Have you read the script?
Yes.
Really?
Well, enough to know garbage when I see it. Jesus, Dorlocks.
Daleks!
Whatever! Bug-eyed.
They're not bug-eyed monsters!
There was plans from the higher-ups at the BBC to cancel Doctor Who straight after the Dalek serial aired, but the viewing figures convinced them otherwise.
First cavemen, now these silly robots.
What are you saying?
That you're not to do any more than these 4 episodes you've already got in production. Kill it, Sidney. Kill Doctor Who.
The story goes as follows. The Doctor, Susan, Barbara and Ian land on a planet thought safe. They leave the TARDIS and discover a petrified forest and a city in the distance. The Doctor was keen to explore the city, but Ian, Barbara and Susan wanted to leave. In an attempt to fool everyone into exploring the city, the Doctor tampers with the fluid link in the TARDIS, saying it has run out of mercury and the only possible place to find more would be in the city. They go and investigate the city in a bid to find mercury. However, they come across the Daleks. Once like us, they were mutated by nuclear war and were forced inside their casings and hate anything that isn't Dalek. They're still trying to wipe out their enemies, the Thals. The TARDIS crew get captured and are slowly being killed by radiation sickness. They then help the Thals defeat the Daleks as they wish to create another blast similar to the one that desolated their planet Skaro. The Dalek voices were played by Peter Hawkins and David Graham. The robotic voices were achieved by having the actors speak through a lip-ribboned microphone, which was later given an electronic quality after being passed through a ring modulator. This technique is still used today, obviously with a lot more advanced technology involved. The designer originally assigned to this serial was Ridley Scott, later a famed film director. However, a problem with Scott's schedule meant that he was replaced by Raymond Kuzik, who was thus given the task of realising the Dalek creatures. Kuzik based the designs of the Daleks on a man sitting in a chair. Kuzik's original design was tubular, with a plain skirt section, bumpy midriff with one pincer arm, and short head with an eye lens. Lambert rejected this design as it would be too expensive. It was decided that the design should be more comfortable for the actors, allowing them to be seated. Kuzik's second design was shorter, with a diamond patterned body and larger head, and 2 double-jointed claw arms. One of the arms was replaced by a suction cup due to the low budget of the production. The design was refined to fit over a small tricycle, and the arms were moved further down to allow the operator to see out of the metal gauze above the midriff. Lights were added to the dome to indicate which Dalek was speaking, as suggested by Barry. Shawcraft models, who had designed parts for the TARDIS set, worked with Kuzik to design the Daleks. When Kuzik met with Shawcraft's Bill Roberts to discuss the project, he used a pepper pot to demonstrate the Daleks' movements. The prototype, known internally as Shawcraft 1, had a wooden base with the skirt section made using fiberglass. It stood at 4 foot 6 inches tall, allowing a small actor to be seated inside. The BBC approved the Shawcraft's designs, allowing 3 weeks for the final models. While Kuzik wanted 6 Daleks, the £500 budget only allowed for 4. The final models stood at 4 foot 8 inches, painted in silver with grey trimmings, and light blue balls on the skirt. The lights on the domes were Christmas tree lights covered by a ping pong ball, operated by the actor inside. A week of shooting took place from the 28th of October 1963, consisting mostly of inserts of the city and models. Rehearsals for the cast began on the 11th of November. Nation only attended one session due to work commitments. Some of the Dalek dialogue was pre-recorded on the 13th of November by Hawkins and Graham, portraying the higher-pitched Dalek 1 and the lower-pitched Dalek 2, respectively. Weekly recordings of the serial began on the 15th of November. It was later discovered that the first recordings were affected by induction, an effect in which the voices from the production assistant's headphones was clearly audible. The episode was re-recorded on the 6th of December, pushing the weekly recordings of 4 to 7 episodes back by 1 week. The final episode was recorded on the 10th of January 1964. It's safe to say that the Daleks saved Doctor Who from death, ironic as that may be. William Hartnell saw success of the role and saw the effect it was having on children, and he was incredibly proud of the role. But the early years of Doctor Who was not all plain sailing. As time continued, the scenes behind the curtain became plagued with change and illness. But until next time, let's reflect and remember all the wonderful, hard-working individuals who brought the show to life, and without them, I wouldn't be sat here writing this script, recording this audio, and editing this video. Join us next time on the creation of Doctor Who. All clips and audio are used in fair use, and all rights to Doctor Who, the TARDIS and the Daleks belong to the British Broadcasting Corporation. Sources used in this video are TARDIS Fandom, Wikipedia, DoctorWhoStatistics.com, An Adventure in Space and Time, and the BBC Archive. An Adventure in Space and Time is a 2013 docufilm made for the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, starring David Bradley as William Hartnell. The film is a dramatised version of the origin of the show from 1963 to 1966. I would highly recommend that film to anyone after watching this series.